Today's episode was sponsored by a private donation from London, Ontario, Canada. Thank you for your support and keeping this train going. Welcome, everyone, to the Tons of Productions podcast on this Monday, September 30th, 2019. Today, I talk with Dan Henshaw. He is a camera operator here in Vancouver, BC, and has been doing it for quite a few years. He started doing his camera trainee back in the 1980s on Three Men and a Little Lady, and has worked his way up bit by bit over the years to be camera operator, and now has been that for, I guess, about 10 years. So he really knows a lot of being on set, obviously, and he's also done lots of independent filming as well, and done cinematography for that. So really interesting person, and I know you'll enjoy this interview. So here you go. Here is Dan Henshaw. You are listening to the Tons of Productions podcast. And we are speeding. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Very good, Mike.
It's been
thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for being on. It's been a long time since we've talked. It's probably 10 years. We saw each other on the Commercial Drive a couple of times, but we haven't worked together since 2008-ish, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, it's been quite a while.
Yeah. When we're getting into the story here, I was wondering. I usually ask all my guests who are on here, where are you from? Where were you born?
I was born in Montreal, and I kind of grew up. My parents moved around quite a bit, and but eventually we landed in a little town just south of Montreal, in a little farming community. And it was the furthest thing away from Hollywood. I was born a long time ago. I was born in 1955, and last century, and. We didn't have what we got today, phones and things like that.
Yeah, no cell phones, no internet, no nothing.
Nothing. Nope, nothing. It was all word of mouth and things like this. And so, Quebec is a kind of a funny place because it is a little bit isolated from the rest of the world in the sense that language and all that stuff. So it doesn't really... at that time, it didn't really get out there, in a sense that, so Hollywood, the idea of Hollywood was really kind of far away. It was California, and all things California were really far away. But, with Hunter S. Thompson's books and stuff like this that we all liked to read when we were kids.
Right.
That brought everything a little bit closer, but it was still geographically far away, and nothing was happening in terms of like Hollywood moving someplace else, like particularly Ormstown, Quebec, to make movies. So
yeah, exactly. Like today, where it's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently they have found that little town a good location for some stuff that they like to shoot. But
you don't have a French accent at all.
No, I'm English actually. I was born English, and in those days it was like. You didn't have to take French classes until quite late. So,
I see.
So I did. So I learned most of my French like from my friends and in bars and stuff like this. I could speak pretty good bar French, but I couldn't. Yeah,
bar French.
When it got down to actually working, I was always a paragraph behind everybody else. So I decided to move to Toronto.
How old were you then?
I was 30, and that's. I had gone to university in Montreal because the going to university in Montreal at that time was really inexpensive. I was a mature student. I went back when I was 26 years old, maybe.
And what did you take? What was your major?
Cinema.
Oh, okay. So you took film back then. Okay.
Yeah, I took film, but you know what? It was like I didn't know what I was going to do. I just happened to. How I got into business was essentially I went to California to visit my aunt and uncle. At that particular point in time, I had nothing going on. I was working construction jobs and things like this. And I just, wanted to go to California. So I had a motorcycle. I went down to California.
Nice.
Yeah, I got down there, and my uncle said, "What are you going to do when you go back to Canada?" I was going to go back in like 2 weeks. I said, "Well, I'll probably get a job in construction and this and that." And so he said, "Why don't you stay here and you can work for me? I'll give you you have a little place to stay in the back." And they had a little pool house in the back.
Okay.
Great. And so I thought, what the hell, I mean, at that time was, pre 9/11 for sure. So that was like 1970s. And so you could kind of do something like that.
No passport for Canadians or nothing like no restrictions.
Nothing, nothing. Not like when I went down over the border, I just said I was going for a couple of weeks, and I ended up spending a year down there. So, yeah. But in that year, working with my uncle, who was a pretty arty guy, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I go, "Well, I guess I can do construction, this and that." He says, No. He says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I had this dream to get into movies." And he said, "Well, there you go. Why don't you do it?" I go, "What? No, I can't do that." It's like, that's so far away. It's like, he said, "Have you ever tried it?" "No." "Well, then try." And I go, "Okay." So I got into a film course in California.
Wow.
And it was a non-credit thing. It was just a sort of an entry-level thing, but it sort of, gave me a good idea about, hey, I like this, and I want to do more of it. So I got
like story structure and that kind of thing, and how to do a screenplay, and
all short stuff, like make a short film, this kind of thing, and it was like,
gotcha.
I had a little Super 8 and that they gave us to make a little movie, and I made a movie about my cousin studying, and so I wasn't expecting any kind of criticism from it or whatever, but all of a sudden everyone would go, "Well, this is interesting. Why did you do this?" And I wasn't prepared for any kind of answers at all, so I got really kind of shocked by the whole thing and kind of withdrew and didn't want to ever do anything ever again because I didn't want to bring that much attention to myself.
You're in the spotlight, yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of uncomfortable with it, and so, but I did like the process, and so I liked it enough to, start making inquiries back in Montreal about, whether they had film programs and, film schools and stuff like that. So, so I went to, lo and behold, Concordia had a film program. So I thought, okay.
Like broadcasting or cinema? That's what you're saying.
They had both. They had the broadcasting program, and everybody said you should get into that. For some reason or another, that was a really hard program to get into, and I didn't get into it. But I also noticed that they also had a film program in St. George campus. That was Loyola campus, had the broadcasting program.
Right.
It wasn't really about film. It was more about maybe news, documentary, broadcasting, things like this. And the Sir George Williams campus had an actual film program. It had a faculty of fine arts film, right? So I tried that one out, and I kind of fluked into it because everybody at that time was wanting to be a director or a writer. And
I know everyone was looking to they don't want to be anyone in the crew or whatever, a cinematographer.
And I was the only one who wanted to be a cinematographer because of the experience that I sort of went through in California. I didn't want to be in that kind of a limelight where I had to explain myself, so I thought maybe it would be better to be behind the camera.
A tech guy behind the camera,
yeah. So they didn't have anybody that wanted to be a cinematographer. I was actually the only one that applied to be a cinematographer.
That is hilarious. I've already interviewed another woman, same thing. She went to school and same thing. No one wanted to be a cinematographer. She's the only one, and it was because... But I think a lot of the directors and or people that think they want to be a director want to be a cinematographer. They think it's all one thing. They don't realize that it's a DP is like a separate thing on its own in every film.
Yeah. It's he has a different role. I mean, he's got to complement and realize the director's vision. In the perfect world, that's what happens. I mean,
right.
Like, in the factory process, of course, it's not quite like that. It's a little bit different. But if you are making films, making movies and stuff like that, then the DP is kind of in bed with the director, as it were, and they're trying to understand and contributing in the vision, along with the production designer and everybody else.
But you're not up
it's
front when you're in that position. You're not like the first name and the one doing interviews and shit.
There sort of was this kind of thing that came up, like Wilmo Sigmund and all that. That it became superstar DPs, and I think
That's true.
Maybe there's more DPs nowadays. That maybe there's a little less of that kind of superstardom going on. But then that was like film as well, right? So film was sort of regarded as a much more, technically challenging medium, I think, to get the consistency and the tone and everything.
And when you started, it was film, right?
Yeah,
right.
It was. Yeah. So I went to Concordia and got in as a cinematographer and shot everybody's movies, and I really liked that. I shot about 7 films.
Wow.
Yeah, and each one was better than the last, so I was kind of pleased with myself. And
you learn from each endeavor, each production.
Yeah, well, you take more risks, right? You go, you want to do something different. You don't want to always do the same thing, right? So
yeah.
So I was taking more risks, and they were all paying out. I ended up getting this little award at the end of the year for best cinematographer, because maybe I was the only cinematographer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't put yourself down like they should be the only cinematographer. That's why you got the award. I mean,
well, self-deprecating humor, right?
Yeah, no, I know.
Anyways, but so and a lot of my friends were French, and working with them, I realized that if I was going to get into the real world in Quebec, and by the way, there was all the guest producers that we had come in was saying how lucky we were going to be. This was a chance that we were going to have a camera in our hand, that we may never ever get to work in a film business again because of the sort of limited prospects that were out there after film school. It was like they were all saying that there was no real, yet these guys were sort of doing it, and it sort of was a question as to so if they're telling us it's so hard, then how did they do it, kind of thing, and why are they where they're at? They seem to be quite successful and well known, but most of them were like local Quebec directors and cinematographers and
did their own productions instead of being hired by a production.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a couple of guys from the NFB come in and kind of say the same thing and stuff like that. But unbeknownst to me, there's this whole other industry going on in Toronto. So when I got out of film school, I realized that just by working with my friends and stuff like that my French was not good enough, and there is a preference for like totally bilingual people in Quebec. So I decided I was going to go to Toronto, and
look for work there.
Yeah, get in. And so when I got to Toronto, I called up the IA and I asked them if there was any like entry level positions. And they said, "Hey, we just started a program for trainees and stuff like that. So you're one of the first guys, so you're in."
Nice.
That's what I said yesterday when I texted you, that it was luck. It was just being in the right place at the right time, with the right attitude, and having all these opportunities. Like, they didn't have cinematographers to go to school. Then all of a sudden they have a training program that they need, because they want to bring people in. Prior to that, everybody was trained in LA, so they would send assistants down to
LA.
I
see.
Yeah. Quite a few of the older operators that I knew, got to know, they had been down in LA working with the union down there and getting the training they needed to come up here and do assistant work and stuff like that. So
when you started, you were just a trainee, and this was like a new thing in Toronto. How did it work?
It worked well. I mean, the first movie that I got onto was 3 Men and a Baby, and
I saw that on your thing.
yeah, and so they, from there it was like the union just. What they do now is they assign you to all the trainees to a production, right? And it's for me, I guess it was a 6-week rotation. I can't really remember it, but all of a sudden I'm making money. I'm making more money than I ever made, like construction or labor.
You're broke right up till then.
Yeah. And my wife was making way more money than I was. And, and so now all of a sudden I'm starting to make money, and I'm a little slow when it comes to, because I want to have a thorough understanding of things before I, take the next step.
Right.
And I decided to be a trainee for a little bit longer than a lot of my peers. Like a lot of them couldn't wait to get out and start, seconding and whatnot.
But you want to be sure before you take that step.
Yeah. I wanted to know. I wanted to feel confident myself. I mean, this is still rather new to me. This and so, feeling probably as lucky as I did, I didn't want to mess it up by being too ambitious.
Yeah, get overzealous and.
Yeah, overzealous. Good word. And so anyways, so that's kind of how it all began. I mean, like if I was to try to, advise anybody or suggest to anybody how to get into the film program, I would say, do whatever you can to sort of build up some kind of resume and that to get yourself into, if you're young enough to get into film schools, then use that to get into, the industry and whatnot. I think that the screening progress is a lot more rigorous nowadays to get in. I know some people who probably should have become trainee candidates that didn't become trainee candidates for one reason or another.
Right.
But I wouldn't let that stop anybody. I would still keep on trying to get in, and keep on doing.
Well, I know indie people that pretty well know like 4 departments inside and out because they've done it for 10 years in the indie world and never really applied it in the union world and go to professional. But when they start, they have 10 years of experience. So they know. And if someone's brand new and they come in, well, that's what they can be up against, right?
Yep. It's a bit of a machine, It's like, we had the trainee program. We had the trainee program so we could learn off the old guys, And so the old guys would teach the young guys, and so there would be sort of a pedigree or a sort of generational thing that would go on from. And I mean, a lot of it's different now because of using digital cameras.
Right.
But the principles are still basically the same. You still have to, have a high level of focus and attention to detail, and it's all about detail.
Oh, and angles and lighting and everything is similar. It's just the medium that you're recording on.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, I find it better because what you see is what you get. You don't have the anxiety of going, of waiting for the next day's work to see it. Like dailies. Dailies could be a lot of fun, but they could also be like a horrifying experience too. Because like, if there's a problem, right? Everybody sees it all at once, and then you have to explain yourself, and it's like, could be instant death,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's pretty cutthroat industry. I mean, if you screw up on multiple occasions, they'll find someone that doesn't.
That's right. Yep.
It's right. Not, and I don't think it's personal. It's business. I mean, if I sunk $2 million into this movie and you screw it up, well, who's this guy? Screw it up by $2 million.
And that's kind of the way it works as well. When you've got somebody who has a track record of doing, $100 million productions and stuff like that, they're going to get the job before you do. So,
right.
Like if you've been able to carry and work a film like that.
If you specialize in a certain thing, I've talked to other cinematographers and they said, say someone specializes in car shots. Some guy specializes in advertising and package, the way they make chips look or something. Like everyone has a specialty in the cinematographer world.
Yeah, I go out on a bit of a limb here and say that's kind of an LA thing. Once you get sort of, defined like that in LA, you kind of always do that.
So you get typecast even if it's crew.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Essentially, my brother-in-law directs a lot of toy commercials and stuff like this, and that's his whole career.
Oh.
So, yeah, he produces, directs that down in LA, and he's tried to break into the, mainstream film business. Or movie making, as it were, and way back when. And he's a great writer. He writes a lot of scripts, but the thing that he seems to get called for the most is toy commercials and stuff like that.
And the more he does it, the better he is, and then the more he does it, the better he is. And
yeah. And he's made a good living for himself doing that. But I don't know that I'm not 100% sure that he's, that's what he always wants to do. Maybe that's now. I don't know. So,
when you were in Toronto and doing this, and then you started working your way up, basically, how long did you stay in Toronto?
I was in Toronto for 4 years. Yeah, well, 5 years. We moved out to Vancouver in 1989,
Okay.
and it was a bit of a risk because I did the last feature film in. I don't even remember the name of it right yet. It's Perfectly Normal, and it was the last kind of IA feature film of that year, and I was second assistant on it, and a good friend of mine now, Angelo Colavecchia, was the focus puller on it. Now he's like a really hot Steadicam operator in Toronto and camera operator in general. But I did that last movie. We had actually moved out to Vancouver, and I went back to
to finish
Toronto.
the production.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And but it sort of got down. My wife was French, and I was English, and I just wasn't going to go back to Montreal to try to do a career in Montreal, and she didn't like living in Toronto because she's from Quebec, and there was that little bit of a Montreal-Toronto rivalry thing. So we thought, oh, we both like Vancouver. Let's go to Vancouver.
Nice.
But I didn't really think that I was gonna. I didn't know whether I was gonna make it in Vancouver, as it were, because things were slowing down in Toronto, and sort of at that particular point in time, it was all one union across the country. It was all Toronto based.
Okay.
So yeah, we were dividing. We were in the process of dividing, and I guess in 1990, I think that was complete. We became 669, and they were 667.
So you were like, actually, your career spans the evolution of the film industry within Canada, because
kind of
you started, it was Super 8. You went into film, doing actual film and loading and dailies were different, and everything was different. I'm so used to the digital world and spoiled, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think, like I say, I think things are a little bit better now, because what you see is what you get. You see what you get right away, and then you can do it again. If all things being equal, it should be super easy, but it's only people that make it difficult, right? So you have the right combination of people, and it's a blast. It's like you have a really, creative, good time, making movies.
Well, yeah. Was the days longer, or the scenes longer when it was film?
Well, I think again that's kind of a budget thing, and a little bit more. It seems as though we can do things faster now, but
I mean, you show the dailies right away instead of setting it up and someone sets up the film and then runs it through and does all the stuff. You could just right away go, look at it. Oh, you don't like it? Do it. Go again, and within 2 minutes or something.
Yeah. Well, days can still be long, but it's usually when you have like good production producers and stuff like that sort of be mindful of what's going on and sort of, kind of oversee things. If you have a sort of a director who is, you give carte blanche to, then you can still spend long days doing stuff. To give them that kind of a blank check, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of money. That's usually what comes down to budget again. It's one of those things where endless money. Oh, the director can have 18-hour days every day. No one cares.
Yeah, well, sure. I've heard of things like, I've heard things that like the dollar exchange, the discounts that we give on, we used to have one contract, and we would make concessions on that one contract.
Right.
And now we have like tons of contracts, and we don't necessarily make concessions on them, but you have a variety of contracts you can pick. So, really, and a variety of different rates too. Like you have low budget rates where you don't have to pay crew as much as you would on a, full scale feature.
Right. Or like
and
CW show or something big that was actually on TV, ABC or something.
Yeah, I mean, they have their own categories, tier 1, tier 2, and they can qualify for different contracts as well. So,
I see.
Yeah, so when you get to the dollar difference, and you get to the, typically, crews used to be paid more in Toronto, Hollywood, and so you would be able to pick up a crew up here for a lot cheaper than you could down in LA.
And that's why a lot of people filmed here. Like they were like, oh,
yeah.
When they saw how cheap it was.
Well, we have a great infrastructure. We have a number of contracts. We have great locations. We have really good crews. We have top-notch crews. I think our crews are just as good as any crew anywhere.
Oh, I've heard that. I've worked on a show where they filmed most of it in Toronto, and they came here to do reshoots. And I, worked on it for a month, and they were saying, "Oh, we should have done the whole movie here."
Yeah.
And nothing against Toronto film; it was just that crew.
No.
But
I think that a lot of shows that I've been on, you've been the best crew ever and stuff like that. And sometimes you think, okay, that's just words, right? But
right.
I think that I think we have great crew here, and they can compete with anybody. So.
Oh, I think so too. When I got involved, this was years ago. It was probably about 5 years before I met you, and just started doing background and doing PA days and kind of seeing, because if you're not from the film world, when you first started, same thing. You're kind of nervous. You don't want to be pointed out or singled out because there's 100 people, Yeah. And but when you really, after a while, you really realize how professional it is, and to watch it is mesmerizing. I watch when someone calls rap, it literally within half an hour, the stuff that took hours to set up is gone.
Gone.
Yeah.
Back in the trucks, ready to go again for another day.
Yeah, exactly. That's wild.
So
I was going to ask you, when did it switch from film to digital? Like, was that was a progression over years, obviously, but I mean, now it's just strictly digital, and you do film for something to do. It's like putting on an LP.
Yeah, I think it sort of came and went a little bit. Like it wasn't. My memory of it is that when it first started, it was it was kind of like, more experimental, and they tried some different things, and some stuff didn't work, and so they went back to film for a bit, and then when digital got better, they came back to digital again and tried it out again. I think I can't remember exactly when all of a sudden everybody went digital.
Oh, okay.
But because it was kind of a gradual process. I mean, it's kind of like what it is now. I mean, you see everybody was happy with 2K, then all of a sudden 4K comes along, and now 6K, and Japan has started looking at 8K, and everybody's good. Yeah, and everybody's going like, okay, so when's all that going to become real? So it's already becoming real, but at the same time, it's not in daily use every day. I mean, we still use 2K cameras and stuff like that for a lot of stuff that we do, and
right.
Netflix wants 4K, and then.
Well, that can be the nightmare of being the owner-operator. That's the other thing, right? You have to stay up with the new stuff that comes out. You always have to go 4K now, 5K now, 8K, whatever it is.
Yeah, Sony's pretty good with that, though. I mean, like I have a Sony FS7, and they've already come out with the Mark II, but it's basically the same camera as the FS7, and the FS7 takes great pictures.
Nice.
And now they've come up with the FS9. It's like shooting 6K. But downsampling to 4K. So, I mean, they're sort of a little bit slower to get, their cameras developed. They're not just dumping a brand new, like, total state-of-the-art camera on the market. They're gradually easing into it, So this camera now is Netflix approved. So we'll probably see that maybe out there somewhere, but maybe that might be for more documentary stuff. I'm not sure.
So they check with people like that, like Netflix or like Prime or anybody, that it will be accepted. Because if you don't do the medium properly and then they don't accept it because it's shot on this kind of camera, you're done. And they've sunk all this money into it. And
well, then, I mean, it certainly limits. It probably limits you. And in many ways, it does limit you, because it's like, okay, so I want to sub-rent my camera, but I can't sub-rent my camera because, it's not approved by Hollywood or whatever, So
right.
I'd say it's not approved by Hollywood. Maybe it's not necessarily Netflix, but,
maybe
like somebody else.
Exactly.
Anybody.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can rent my camera out for documentaries, but I can't rent it out for, series work or something like that.
Wow, I didn't even know that. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. so as an owner operator, it's but I like lately I've been shooting my own shorts. I've done like three little kind of back to film school days again, where I was doing
Like stuff you wrote?
nope, other people's stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's like going back to film school again and starting all over, in many ways, because I've been a second assistant, a first assistant, and now I'm a camera operator, and now I'm dabbling with lighting. So
Well, I'm certainly grateful for you helping me out during that time. I mean, you just got the Steadicam rig. That's what Darlene told me,
yep.
or something. And
Yep.
and you wanted to try it out, and you're like, okay, I'll come out for a day or whatever. You did, you
Yep.
came out, did all the Steadicam shots, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. That was the first time I've ever worked with a Steadicam too.
I kind of learned something from that too, So over the years, I've been amassing, more and more equipment and that. So now I've got a dolly and a jib arm. I got a head.
Nice.
I want to get I want to get a remote head and all these things, so that when I'm finished with this business, as it were, I can still carry on doing shorts and stuff like that. If I'm not broke in the meantime, I got to sell it all. But
well, you did like photography as well on the side, and that was just for the love of cameras. Like once you got into this, or have you done it the whole time? The photography.
Well, I got into photography in university, and but it was sort of as a addendum to cinematography.
Okay.
It just seemed to be a logical thing to get into, so I got into fine art photography. I wouldn't say I wouldn't classify my photography as necessarily fine arts. It's sort of like I call myself a GP, general photographer, so I can shoot like with strobes, and I can do portraiture, and I can do some landscapes. I shoot for a mining company every once in a while, and they send me up to do all their brochures and annual reports and stuff like that. I've done a number of website photography and stuff like that, but
what
it's
about
not
stills and stuff.
Well, that's what I do is stills. I don't do like video.
Right.
I do mostly stills.
Oh, okay.
Like in that sense, but my main business is camera operating.
Right.
So
yeah. Wow. And you've been doing it for a while. I mean,
about 10 years now, 11 years, something like that.
Huh. That's awesome.
I got good breaks. I got lucky on that too. A friend of mine was a DP, and he would have normally given the job to the A camera assistant, but the A camera assistant figured that her role was too big on his shows, so she sort of declined, and he said, well, why don't you try it? So I started doing C camera operate days, and then he got a little Hallmark directorial thing. He asked me if I would come on and do B camera with him, so I did B camera with him. That's been my career. It's just sort of been in the right place at the right time.
I love that. It just falls in your lap when you need it the most, or
kind of.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people getting into camera? I mean, you've had a lot of these lucky breaks, but I mean, as far as you working with other camera trainees and stuff, and is there certain things that they should be aware of when they start?
Things are a lot better nowadays. Assistants, focus pullers, and camera people in my day when I was training were really tough. They were really hard on you. There was like
hazing.
Talk about not so much hazing, but just like I think it was the nature of the business that it was like it's so precise, so precision oriented.
Gotcha.
Any little thing, and so you could get. It was like walking through a minefield in the sense that you wouldn't see mistakes until they happened the next day, So, and it was like people would really be, and everybody worked to such a high standard that if it didn't look like you were doing that, then people would make very quick judgments about what to expect from you, or and treat you like that, And it was kind of I kind of made a promise to myself that I was never going to treat my trainees like I was treated in many, many ways.
Oh,
I wouldn't say abusive, but could be.
Well, no,
in many cases.
I've had a friend that was a camera trainee and he quit because of the way they treated him on the show. This was, I don't know,
Yeah.
quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
But he's like, screw that,
Yeah.
yeah, he said it was really hard, and he obviously didn't want to get into it because he wasn't willing to stick it out. But if you have that love and that passion, then obviously you were willing to stick it out, even though you're probably insulted quite a bit during the time.
Yeah, well, my wife, I told after my experience my first time around on 3 Men and a Baby, I said to my wife, "This is the film business. I don't want anything to do with it." And she said, "Try it out one more time."
Oh,
so I went out, and then I got in with. I was a trainee with my friend Angelo, and it was the best experience. So I stayed.
Trainee with your friend is major difference.
He wasn't my friend at the time, but he was a fair guy. He became a very good friend of mine.
Oh, okay. And is that how you treat trainees then? From then on, you kind of learn from him.
I would like to think I do. I would always have patience for them. Never. I would try to always have patience for them. And I meet people nowadays. I've trained a lot of people myself because I was the second for like. There's really what you're training for is you're training for the seconds position, right? So. So when you go into the training program, don't think that you're going to become DP overnight, right?
Right.
You're joining the union to become, a second assistant, right? So I was a second again, like as a second assistant, I kind of treated it the way I treated, my internship was like I wanted to know everything about it, and so I was a second assistant probably a lot longer than a lot of my friends were, and so. Because I just didn't want to move up without knowing exactly what I was doing. But it's kind of funny because when you do move up, even on a day call basis and stuff, you learn your job better. So if I was to get a bump up to the focus pulling first assistant category on a daily basis because we didn't get anybody or for whatever reason, when I went back to be a second again, I was better at my job. So because I understood the role of the first assistant a little bit better.
It kind of reminds me of the AD world. That you move up. I've had friends that take first AD jobs, even though they're second, and they do it because there's nobody else. And then when they go back to second, they do it so much better. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's across the board. I think if you're a director of photography, it helps to direct. You understand what it's like to be a director. You understand the process, right? So
more than just knowing lighting, more than just knowing angles and lighting. You have to be able to work with people and direct and run it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
But so getting back to the seconding and training thing is like I always wanted to be as informative as I can. I remember I bored probably many trainees by staying after work, walking to the parking lot with them, chatting with them about the job and stuff like this. I think there's probably a few people in town who would probably say that I did it. I would talk forever about the job and politics of the job and stuff like this and things like that. So, but I tried to give a level of understanding that nobody kind of gave me, because eventually I was going to be competing for their jobs, right? So,
right. But then, hey, like. Back then, too, people competed for jobs almost because there was, if you're talking in the 90s and in the early 2000s, when I first started, there wasn't this volume of shows being filmed here. Like
it was on and off, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have times, that writer's strike kind of put everything on hiatus, basically, for I don't know how long that was. And then we had the credit thing going to Toronto, shows going to Toronto and stuff.
Yeah. There's always been there's always fierce competition between jurisdictions and stuff like that. So in LA, they for the longest time they hated us. So
Oh really? Because it was competition. It was the rivalry.
Oh yeah, for sure. We were. They still probably
those Canadians
stealing our jobs and whatnot. But that's we're all part of the same union. We're all part of. So it doesn't really kind of hold water. It doesn't make sense. But some producers, I would say, probably, in order to get a good deal out of LA, might pit Vancouver against LA. So, and I don't say that that's what's going on now, because it seems as though everybody's working and so everybody's happy. But when work gets a little scarce, then people start pointing fingers and stuff like that. So
Right.
it's like that. The 2000s, like when the dollar was down around 65 cents or so.
I remember that. Yeah.
There was a lot of people shooting up here that didn't want to shoot up here. It was like, it almost seems as though when the dollar's at like 75 cents to 80 cents, then you have people who want to shoot here as opposed to people who are forced to shoot here.
Right.
So because of budget things and dollar values, so people come up. I don't think they're necessarily happy to come up to Canada to shoot. So when it was down so low, I remember doing commercials, and a couple of commercial guys were just had nothing good to say about Canada, and was like, well, why are you here?
Oh yeah, I've had an AD talk about that, and he said the director and the DP were from the States, and they just badmouthed Canadians. They were all just ignorant and short and stuff. And he was like,
yeah.
I'm on your AD team. I'm here to help you. You don't talk to me that way. And he quit the show.
Yeah.
He actually walked from the show. It got to the point where you don't usually. You stick it out because you make a commitment. I'll do the show and then don't work with them again. But it just got to that point where it was so rude. But this, again, we're talking over 10 years ago. Like today, there's so much content, so much going on. It's the film industry, and they don't care. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm gonna hire you. You do the job or not.
Yep. No, it's a bit of a different ballgame. You kind of got to wonder, having gone through the ups and downs, how long it's going to sustain itself. But it could very well be here to stay. Who knows?
Well, yeah. Now that everyone has cell phones and you literally have YouTube in your pocket. I mean, I think, and plus everyone's streaming, like Disney, and then there's already Amazon's trying to compete with Netflix, but all these other ones are starting their own streaming networks. Pay $10 a month, pay $8 a month. You know, I've got HBO for so cheap now. I forget what it is, but it's cheap a month. Yeah. Like we got rid of cable a while ago.
Yeah. Well, here's something for you. I'm working on a little thing now called 50 States of Terror, and it's for Quibi. Quibi's a new network that's
really
targeting cell phones and iPads and stuff like that. We're making movies for small screens. So
wow,
and they're really good. We've had this is a really.
Is it Canadian?
They're really no. It's American. It's a very thoughtful thing. Sam Raimi's our director.
You have Sam Raimi as your director?
Yep.
That is awesome. I'm a huge fan of this. Oh, wow.
They're taking it very seriously and hiring Rachel Brosnahan as our leading lady. And
wow. Yeah. It seems like such a, I don't know how to say, but it seems like because there's 4 cell phones and tablets in like a small format, it's wild. They're sinking so much into it,
Yeah. It is wild because, and the thing of it is that this, it could really fly, so.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be that way because so many people are now addicted to looking at and watching things on small screens. I have friends that watch whole movies on their phone. And I'm like, what? I don't personally, but this, I'm 50. I just turned 50. Like, I don't know. I'm from the generation where it was television. The television was thick,
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's kind of where it all started, right? It was the TV of the 60s and 70s, and then the sort of American new wave. That's kind of all young Coppolas and Steven Spielberg's and Martin Scorsese's and all that stuff. It all came from there. Right? So,
oh yeah, and it seems like we're swinging back to television to be the main medium that everyone wants to do now. I mean, you see all these movie stars doing television shows where before it was like an insult. Oh, you did a TV show? Oh well, you haven't made it to the movies. Or if you saw someone do a TV show, you're like, okay, your career has waned a bit. But now it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
Have you ever done on the floor broadcasting live kind of stuff?
No.
Oh, okay. No. It's always been just film.
It's always been narrative.
Okay.
Yeah. Always been narrative drama. stuff like that. It's always been like that. It's I've thought about it. I've wanted to get into more of that kind of stuff, but it's like I don't know. You kind of get into again. It's like if I put more time into my photography, I'd be a better photographer and better businessman.
Right.
And go get more work as a photographer. But as soon as you get started trying to, okay, this is what I'm going to do, then all of a sudden the phone rings and somebody says, hey, can you come and do my show? And I goes, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and the time you're putting into it, because once someone makes that call, you are 100% on board of that's your attention. Like, you can't really do side projects while it's going on unless you're hiatus or, there's some reason.
Even so, it doesn't give you enough time, hiatus.
Right.
The 2 months in between, you want to try, if you do get onto a long form series and you only got 2 months off a year, you really don't want to work, I did X-Files first season, and I learned that one there. I was in those days. It was kind of coming to the end of the way that camera departments were structured. We had maybe A and B cameras. We had like 2 operators. We had 2 focus pullers, and then we only had 1 second assistant to load.
You did a few years on that.
I did 4. Yeah.
4 years. Wow.
Yeah. And then, but the second season was very different from the first season. That's when things changed over. So, like, I was the only second assistant to load for 2 cameras and manage all the gear and stuff like this on the truck. And because you're kind of like I guess a crossover job would be like a warehouse shipper receiver kind of warehouse manager kind of thing. And so you're in charge of getting all the equipment. And
knowing where the gear is all times, and
and where the film's going, and ordering film, and exactly. So
batteries
and
too, and stuff.
Essentially, batteries. Essentially, in charge of everything that sort of kept the production equipment coming and going from the rental house to the production, and all the film necessary. And that's something that wasn't really explained. You had to kind of figure it out for yourself. Like nobody would say, hey, you're kind of equivalent of like a warehouse manager, where you have to be mindful of everything that comes and goes, like the supplies or I'm trying to think of the word, military, what is it, the canteen or something, anyway.
I see. Yeah.
So you're in charge of all the things that sort of come and go, and then the focus puller is in charge of taking first assistant focus puller is in charge of sort of being the technical arm of the director of photography, and in a real world, sort of advising him about maybe some technical issues that he wants to do, that he may rely on a first focus puller to give him the information to do that, because he knows everything there is.
So he'd say this shot would be better with a Movi or with a Steadicam or something like that.
Well, that's another thing altogether, but yeah, something like that.
Because that's your shot list. Yeah, you start with the shot list, but if they would suggest to the DP, hey, this would work better this way, kind of thing. I don't know.
It might be more in terms of like focus issues that they might have. Might be more like, I need a little extra stop, so I would need you. You would have to light to a 2.8 as opposed to a 1.4 or something like that.
Oh, I see.
So that kind of thing, and making suggestions about what technically might work better under certain circumstances. Like the difference between that's kind of an operator thing as to, like, in an ideal world, that would be kind of an operator thing as to how the shot is executed. But since so many DPs come from operating, they have a good idea about how they want to do it anyways. And then the director would probably say, well, I really want a Steadicam shot, so I'm going to design for a Steadicam shot. This shot, scene 25 is going to be a Steadicam. So
gotcha.
We'll design. Yeah. So I'm going to design this intricate shot. Like, there's a lot of times to get out on the floor. I wanted to do this on a Steadicam. The camera operator might say, well, I think we can do it on a dolly and get a better result, kind of thing. So
gotcha. So it's predetermined before you get there. That's just more about the last second if there is something like that where you're
There's
like,
always changes. There's
Right.
always changes that happen. So, you have to be, and that's where your experience sort of kicks
so
in. Is it,
like, is that why, like, say, because I've been on sets where they decide to block shoot, say, at the last minute. They're like, actually, it's better if we do all the scenes on this side and then flip it around because of time and because of lighting, and it would save for the daytime out the window and stuff. There was a bunch of different reasons, right? But they switched it at the last minute.
Yeah, it's a kind of a, I suppose it's a, like in that kind of sense, it would be like a fallback strategy. Maybe they're in trouble and they got to get the stuff done.
Or time limit too.
Time.
We have to get it done
time.
today because we don't have this location after today.
Yeah, could be something like that. But you know what? I think that for me, I don't like necessarily block shooting because it seems to me that you're asking a lot of your actors because they don't get to finish the scene in that space that they're in. They move on from one space to another. But TV is a lot about delivering dialogue than it is about really high quality acting, unless you've got the time and the stories
and the money and
to do that.
Yeah. I mean, for the listeners, actually, if they don't know what block shooting is, that's when you film everything from one side, and then you go to the other side of the room or the other side of the scene, and then film the exact same thing from the other side for the whole day.
It would be a lighting, So like it would be, scenes 10, 12, 14, 15. We're going to all shoot one way and then turn around and shoot 10, 12, 14, 15 back the other way again.
Right.
So there's like scene breaks in between where you might sort of lose it as an actor, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if you turn it around and you do it in a quicker time, then usually the actor stays in character of that scene and does it again quite better or just more fluidly, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of a lighting thing. It's like if you got a big lighting change and big lighting setup, that's where that works the best. Because if you shoot all one way, say, this is my opinion too. I'm not necessarily a DP of that caliber, but the thing is that it would seem to me that it would be, it would move things faster to do it that way, especially if it's like very, very technical. So it makes it much more harder on everybody because then, like people who are looking for continuity, script supervisors and that, they have to be really on the ball. Everybody has to be more on the ball because if things change over time, then when you turn around, they can't change. They have to be consistent, right?
Right. And it also, it depends on interior, exterior. There's a lot of factors that factor into it. I mean, exterior,
Mostly
I've seen big shows like Walking Dead or other big shows where I see one way it's kind of raining, the other way it's not,
Yeah.
And you're like,
that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's sort of inconsistencies that sort of happen, and it's all about consistency. You don't want any details to sort of be in narrative. You don't want things to draw attention. You don't want the furniture to be different. You don't want
the water bottle.
Little differences. Yeah.
Remember that whole scandal with the Game of Thrones water bottle? Oh my God.
No, you know what? I kind of missed that one, but I know what that's all about. Because people leave things on set. And yeah.
Or you say
actors
set your water.
Actors are hiding. They're always hiding a set aside somewhere that might be seen.
Oh yeah. You put your water bottle behind a chair, and then they move the chair. You don't know, and then it's in the scene all of a sudden.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's a good bit of again. It's like we have digital, so we can see all those things. So technically speaking, it shouldn't happen. And also we have digital, and it's really It's like on my editing. Final Cut Pro, you can, if you know what you're doing, you can take stuff out easy, but everything costs money.
I wonder something like Game of Thrones, they got so much money and it's such a big production. It was just missed, I guess, because you could easily just scrub it out, right?
Yeah. But, costs money. So, and maybe nobody saw it. There's always a possibility that nobody saw it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I look at those big productions, and I usually, since there's so many eyes on it, that's why these things come out. But how many other shows that don't have really big a following you don't hear about? But I see inconsistencies. They have a watch on. They have their jacket on. They don't now. And they had a bad scripties, basically, or someone watching the consistency. So, well,
I don't think it's a question of bad. I think it's just that things happen so fast.
That's true. That's true.
That unless you've got that's why one of the reasons why 18-hour days is a real drag, because I think, personally speaking, in my opinion is that you're not getting anything over 12 hours. You're not, your crew is getting tired. You're starting to everybody's starting to get grumpy.
Yeah.
When you're going to do an 18-hour day, it looks great on Thursday afternoon when you get your paycheck, but it's I don't think you gain anything production terms by doing long days.
It all hits the editing room floor.
Yeah, a lot of stuff hits the editing room floor. Lots, tons. If you have 2 cameras, maybe you only use 1.
Oh, I've worked on ones where they do a huge setup and they build this thing, and it takes 2 weeks on prep to build it, and then they film it, and they're like, it doesn't look good, and they scrap the whole thing, and it's not even in the production. You're like, that cost you $300,000 or whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Anytime.
I appreciate it, because you have been in the industry for quite a while and have been around all these big productions and television shows and movies, and it's really well. One more thing before you go. I was going to ask you, were you around when the X-Files moved to L.A.?
That was after the 5th season. They were, the funny part about it is that they'd only talked about 5 seasons. When we got together, it was a sort of a little meet and greet at the old O'Keefe Studios on Arbutus and 12th or so.
Okay.
And now it's all condos, but then there was this old brewery that they turned into a studio. And they said that we were going to make little mini features, and we weren't going to really necessarily. We were going to shoot a script without kind of a time to it. So I don't know. I think we did 13 days for the first episode or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Really long, and it wasn't long before they started saying, "Hey, we can't do this. We have to pull back, and we have to do 8-day episodes, and then we'll get a second unit." We had huge second units. We had second units that would run every day.
Really?
Like a 8-day episode second unit. And,
well, for the listener, so they know, a second unit is basically a crew that makes up the stuff that the first unit missed. So if the first unit, say, films a scene at some place and they don't get all the footage and there's something missed, a second unit will go back in and film it.
Yep.
And that's how it works. So when you have an 8-day one, that means they're trying to keep up with it. Oh my God, that's really a lot.
Well, it was really ambitious. It was super, super ambitious show. And so we went 13 days. Normally we go 8. So we went into what would be passed off to a second unit for, another 5 days, right? So
wow.
Yep. That was that's where I bumped up to Focus Blower. I would go out and start doing second units. So yeah.
Wow.
And then break off from main unit and go and do second unit. I got my my company name, Who's Dan Productions, essentially from David Duchovny on X-Files way back when. Yeah. It was a funny little story. John Bartley was our director of photography, and I knew it was going to be a really tough show, so I got a friend of mine to come in and help me. She was my trainee, and her name was Liz House, and I could leave Liz. Liz was so good out of the gate that I could leave Liz on set with Marty McAnally, who was my focus puller.
Right.
And they could work together, and the day would get done, right? So the end of the rotation, her rotation came up, and John was saying, "Geez, it's too bad that," he said to David Duchovny, he said, "It's too bad that we're going to lose Liz tomorrow. And David said, lose Liz? Why? Because like he'd gotten used to working with her on set.
Right.
I'd been off set doing the background stuff so much. And so he says, so David said, why are we losing Liz? And he says, well, she's the trainee and her rotation's up. She goes, I thought she was the second. He says, no, Dan's the second. And he says, well, can't we get rid of Dan and keep Liz? So he said, no. He said, who's Dan? Can't we get rid of Dan and keep Liz? And I go, when I started my production company, I said, oh, who's Dan might be a good one. So,
who's Dan? That's the name. Good one. That's hilarious.
So I went up to David and I said, I'm going to call my production because we joked about it a few times, and I said I'm going to call it Who's Dan Productions. He goes, thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I met David Duchovny. Actually, it was a movie. When I first PA'd, it was the X-File movie.
Yeah.
Probably 2006, 2007. I don't know, a long time ago. But
yeah, I like those guys. They were really, him and Jillian were really great people, and it was a real pleasure to work with them. And I think it's like you've worked out in the rain and stuff like this, and like I was just working out in the rain a couple of days ago when it was torrential, and it was like, I remember when David Duchovny said all that. I said, yeah, he was absolutely right. They're all, David and Jillian weren't necessarily my friends, but Liz and Marty were my very good friends. So.
Nice, but it was a great production to work for. Like you had fun on that one.
Yeah, we had lots of fun. I mean, it was hard work, but we had a lot of fun on it too. And a lot of great people came through that camera department and became like really, really, really good at their craft after that.
Nice.
Post X-Files,
That's wild. And then you started doing films?
Films?
Because after that, after the X-Files, I'm looking at your...
So I stayed in as a focus puller, you've got a much more... As an assistant, this is an assistant's town. I think a lot of people should understand it. For the most part, this is an assistant's town. It's like the people who work in the camera department are always going to work as assistants.
Oh, okay.
Because they could bring in their own operators, they can bring in their own DPs and stuff like that. And so consequently, they don't always bring, it depends on the budget again. Like if you're talking about like a huge feature, then they might bring in their own focus pullers. But we got world-class focus pullers here. So oftentimes they'll just hire our local focus pullers, and we're happy to do that, because our guys have had like experience on multi-million-dollar pictures, right?
Right, massive.
So, yeah, but for the most part, like if you want a sort of a guaranteed job in the industry, then you want to sort of focus on being an assistant. When you get up into camera operators, they may not always need a camera operator, and you have to be on good terms with the community, because the community sticks together. And so, like, if you're sort of not highly regarded as a camera operator, assistants will say, I don't want to work with that guy. So
Gotcha.
You have to, so I would, you always have to sort of, and people sort of test you out, they want to see what you're kind of made of. And, so they might give you a hard time, but if you have thick skin, then you can pretty much get a job and have a good career. I'm not saying that people are out and out abusive, but I'm saying that, like, you need a sense of humor. You need to,
right.
There's
reliable,
a lot of things that,
sense of humor, reliable, and
hardworking,
and part of a team. Be able to work with a team.
Yeah, and also know that the better natured you are, the better off you're going to be. Like I've stuck to principles a couple of times, and I've paid for it. I think a lot of people have, but and I mean, I'm not saying that you got to be unprincipled, but I'm just saying you sort of have, like maybe I was too strident.
Right.
And
too
so
sensitive.
if I would have too sensitive, too strident, if I would have lightened up a little bit, I know people who are kind of the same as me that did have a little bit that weren't as strident as I was at various times, and they weathered things a lot better than say me. I'm not saying I didn't do too badly. I've done very, very well. I've had a really great career. So in a sense, that didn't hurt me. But in retrospect, I think I could have, played the game a little bit better than I did. Say.
Yeah, but you learn as you go, and now you're sitting in a pretty good position now.
Yeah, my thing was that I had a personal friend that hired me on a show, and one thing led to another to put him into a tight spot. So he had to say, "Listen, you kind of got to go." And I kind of got a bit indignant about it. If I would have just said, "Yeah, sure," I got it. Then he would have been, saying, "Okay, in the next show I'll hire Dan again because, he's not going to make me look bad or anything like that."
Right.
Not that I did. I mean, that show worked out anyways. But I think there was, some, on my part, there was a little bit of, I was a little bit put out. So,
yeah.
And I don't think that goes well.
And now you're more accepting, and you don't
make
so much of a stinker, make it like a
I don't take things as don't take things as personally as I did once upon a time. Yeah.
Because that's the artist, eh? You're looking at it as an artist eye instead of just
it's just something that happens, and for me it was a new thing. I was always, you're always like, in those days you didn't know whether dailies were going to come back and you were going to get fired or whatever. I think you got to get fired once or twice in order to be okay. So
to learn.
It's not as bad as I think it's going to be. So now I can really do my job, right?
Right.
So in that sense, it's like I got okay. So I'd gone for 5 or 6 years of not getting fired, and all of a sudden I felt like I got fired on this particular show, and I took it much more personally than I should have, because I wasn't really fired, but for me. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, if that's what being fired's about, then I'm not going to worry about it anymore. And I never did, and I, recovered, and everything was great.
Nice. So that would be the advice. Don't take it so personal. Yeah. Like, let it go, because you can really hurt yourself in the future if you don't.
I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened with your friend who was in the training program, but that's probably what happened. Something like that, taking it far too personal. And then
that's exactly, I think, what happened, because he was a sensitive guy, and he would get right upset and indignant pretty quick. And then, hey, that doesn't serve. When you have to look at it like, I don't know, with an accepting thing. I mean, not everyone's going to be nice, and not everyone's going to be hard, but yeah. It's if you're more accepting and don't take things so personally, you'll work a lot easier.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you got to leave the job. What Angelo told me was, it's one shot at a time, right? It's like you do this shot, and then you essentially set up and do the next shot, and the way that you did the last shot is exactly the way you're going to do the next shot, right? So you have your procedure, you have all your procedures and things like this, and it's just a repetitive thing. When you get going really fast, you rely on that as a kind of a habit, So.
Okay, well, thank you again. This has been fantastic talk, and I so appreciate your wisdom around working in the camera department. I personally have never worked camera, but I've had so many friends that have done that and been DPs, and you really have a wealth of knowledge from all your time working in the film.
Well, you got to. I always try to give it back. It's a fantastic job. It's a fantastic department, and for somebody who was really looking forward to a life of maybe, seasonal farm work and construction work once upon a time, it's like, this is the thing that liberated me, made me fly, became the person that I am today. So, I take any opportunity I can to give it back to somebody for starting out.
Well, I'm sure a lot of the people that work with you appreciate it.
I hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and I enjoyed our talk.
All right, thanks.
That was fantastic. I hope everyone has a great week and weekend. Take care.